This video is for business and HR leaders who understand the power of choice in business and workplace engagement and what to do about it. So if there's anything about this video that you find useful, powerful, beneficial, insightful, if I'm lucky, please like, share, subscribe, or comment, or reach out to me directly and ask me questions. I'm happy to answer them if I can. So last week, for about 3 days in a row, they were building a scaffolding around my building. Now, the reason they're doing this isn't completely clear to me. It's either that they're going to repaint the building or clean the building, but they're building this scaffolding. And when they're building this scaffolding is just when I'm going to sleep because of the time difference between here and North America, Canada, and the US. I usually basically stay awake all night to early AM, my local time, which means when workmen are showing up to do construction, like building scaffolding, I'm just going to sleep. Now you'd think, excuse me while I do this, I have to do it this way. Somehow, all 3 days in a row, I've been able to fall asleep. Now, if it had happened just once, I could have went, well, I was just really exhausted and I fell asleep anyway. But I'm falling asleep to ridiculous levels of noise. Crashing, banging, people yelling at each other around the corner of the building to make sure everything's fine. Drilling, like impact drills where they're actually drilling anchors into the side of the building. Because the building's concrete, that means no matter where on the whole structure they're drilling, I can hear it like it's right next to my head. This is the conditions I was falling asleep under. As I said, if it was just once, I could have chalked that up to chance, but I did this 3 days consecutively where it was like, I don't know how I'm going to go to sleep. I'm going to try to sort of meditate, focus, count backward, that whole old way to fall asleep. And to my own shock, 3 days in a row, I remember going to sleep thinking, focus, ignore the sound, basically focus on your breathing, focus on your counting, and how am I ever going to get to sleep? And within a certain amount of time, I don't know, less than it took for me to count from 100 to 0. The next thing I know, I woke up, it was completely silent, and I was well rested. So this is just to show you something I talked about inattentional deafness in Crush It Club 143, Mindful Learning. And basically, inattentional deafness is the inability to consciously hear or perceive sound that your ears hear and your brain also hears, but because your attention is so focused on something else, or because your reticular activating system, the part of your brain that tells you whether you can safely ignore something or not. There's many things in an environment our brain just says, well, I see them, I detect them, but they're not important for survival and they're not important for this person's well-being or their interests. It's the part of your brain that decides that. It's like see but ignore, or detect but ignore, or detect and pay attention to. That's when many people think they get revelations from spirits and stuff. It's probably just your reticular activating system and what you've done to train it consciously or unconsciously, accidentally or not accidentally. That's how I'm able to, and it's not because I'm special, it's because my brain understood 3 days in a row with no practice, none of the normal training I would recommend for something like this. My brain understood, or my RAS understood, or my thalamus understood, you don't need to pay attention to this. It's not threatening to your safety or survival, and it's of no particular interest to you. So it's totally okay to go asleep. And it allowed me to, despite hearing it, despite my brain hearing it, completely ignore it and fall asleep in the equivalent to your boss sitting right here and yelling at you for 8 hours while you fell asleep on your keyboard. So that's why I called this episode, and I got to look back for the name, Falling Asleep While Your Boss Yells at You. So just understand what the equivalent is. This isn't your boss was yelling at you and you fell asleep. It was like your boss stood beside you. That was the level of noise we were dealing with. You leaned over, put your head down on your keyboard, and he yelled at you for the next 8 hours. And you woke up and he was either going home, or you woke up only to discover he was still yelling at you, and yet you got a full night's rest. What makes this so amazing, first of all, I'm going to go back to the inattentional deafness I talked about in Crush It Club 143, and it's because there's a famous example of this with something called inattentional blindness, which is the visual equivalent to inattentional deafness. And I will put a link somewhere. If you look up the invisible gorilla, I'm still compromised in terms of my ability to get into and edit my YouTube studio. I don't understand why. I'm not a YouTube tech guy, as you can tell, but I understand how your brain works. So if you check out the invisible gorilla, it's the inattentional blindness equivalent to what I'm talking about. And it is amazing, our brain's ability to choose what to pay attention to and what not to pay attention to. And this is why this is so astounding, is because what this means and what this demonstrates, and I've never had an example like this. I didn't plan it, it just happened. I've never had an example like this to be able to look at and say, well, look, this is how you, as the owner, the business leader, the HR leader, what you're dealing with if you don't know how to get the attention and the engagement of your employees. It doesn't matter, like I said, you could stand beside them and yell at them. You could threaten to fire them for not being more engaged and interested in the work that you think is so meaningful, but they don't care about. It isn't, by and large, going to work. As much as you'd think that would be impossible to ignore, it should be impossible for me to ignore all those sounds while I'm trying to fall asleep. Especially, like I said, repeatedly, kind of demonstrates that it's not just a one-off fluke chance, and I did no training for this. I didn't say, well, I know there's going to be this noise, I'm going to train up so that I can sleep through this, I'll figure out a way to do it. None of that happened. And yet I did. And yet I was able to. This just goes to show you the primary thing that matters in terms of workplace engagement is not that half-assed, half-hearted, insincere speech you give telling them why this is so important to society. If it isn't personal and meaningful to them, they can do the equivalent to falling asleep on the keyboard while you stand beside them and yell at them at full volume for 8 hours, and they can wake up fully rested. So if you want to know something that works in procedures, methodologies that work for getting the attention, getting the engagement, you have to understand really what this comes down to. It's basically, since our brains can do what my brain did in this example, employees must choose to be engaged. The best way I know is to make their job, and I referred to this already, and their work personally meaningful to every single employee in one way or another. That's it for Crush It Club 163, I believe. It's hard for me to tell. I can't get into everything on my computer right now, my backup computer. So this, I believe, was Crush It Club 163. Falling asleep, I got to look at that too. Falling asleep while your boss yells at you. That I've already checked the market pull side, and that is 100 out of 100 for the keyword search terms in TubeBuddy. So I know it's a good title. So if you want to know how to do this, if you want to learn how to design engagement that's personally meaningful and voluntary for most or all of your employees, reach out to me directly at tim@crush-it-club.com, or comment to learn how. My name is Tim B. Green. Bye for now.